Just as the words left his lips, the two suddenly felt weightless once more, and their positions changed from lying to upright. That coffin boat abruptly rose up and swiftly plunged, forcefully flipping upside down. Ho Chang had his arms tight around Shalian's waist, his other hand shielding his head. He exclaimed, "Hold on tight to me." If this was the outside, all the spinning could be 3 times more violent, and Shalian would be able to deal with it. The problem was that they were trapped inside a narrow, tight space, their limbs unable to stretch out, ignorant of what was happening outside. Tense and anxious, Shalian wondered, what if the coffin boat breaks? "Don't worry, even if it breaks, I'm here. You won't sink," Ho Chang responded. At this moment, they were both firmly pressed against each other, and Ho Chang's words were uttered through the brush of his lips over Shalian's hair. Shalian could almost feel the slight trembling of his Adam's apple. His mind was going astray. Then his attention was stolen away by another wave of violent rolling. It was like this boat had become a toy being jostled about by a toddler, shaking and swinging it unceasingly. Without any other choice, Shalian embraced Ho Chang tightly with one hand, and the other hand held onto the edge of the coffin. Amidst the chaos, the two dipped and dropped, flipped and flopped into who knows how many different positions, banging heavily into all sorts of different parts of each other, thoroughly rubbing against one another. Even though Ho Chang had the appearance of a young man, it was only having been tumbled about like this that Shalian realized that Ho Chang was solid and hard from top to bottom. Shalian was going starry-eyed from this torment, and when the feeling finally faded for a moment, he found that Ho Chang was now on top of him, pressing down heavily, suffocating him. With great difficulty, Shalian raised a hand and grabbed onto the arm Ho Chang was using to support himself next to his body. He softly groaned, his head spinning. "Is it over yet?" For some reason, Ho Chang didn't respond. Before Shalian finished his sentence, his breathing suddenly hitched, because he suddenly noticed that a certain part of his body was experiencing an unthinkable shift. In an instant, Shalian felt more incredulous than if he was to see a steel tree blossom. At least, if he saw a steel tree blossom, his mind wouldn't be this blank. A horrifying embarrassment and awkwardness battered him more violently than the tempest was battering the coffin outside. Shalian hastily closed his knees. However, closing his knees didn't seem to be the right move. He seemed to have touched something he shouldn't have, because Ho Chang grunted briskly. "Don't move." That grunt was deep and sharp, and Shalian quickly flattened his legs again. If he didn't close his knees, he was scared that Ho Chang might notice his body's reaction, in which case he might as well smash his own head against the coffin and die. This could have been explained away by unavoidable natural reaction. But the awkward thing was, there was already that incident on the island. Once or twice, he could say it was unintentional, but after the third or the fourth time, how could he possibly explain himself? In such a dire situation, Shalian blurted out, "No, Sun Lang, don't touch me." After a brief moment of silence, Ho Chang said with a dark voice, "Very well, let's break out of here." It was like Shalian was absolved, and he cried, "Go!" Suddenly, another vicious weightlessness attacked, and the coffin that contained the two was thrust into the air. At the same time, Ho Chang and Shalian both smacked their palm on either side of the coffin. Instantly, it cracked into pieces. The two broke out of the boat, and the pair leapt out under the moonlight. Shirin looked back and saw a giant water dragon dangle broken pieces of that coffin in its mouth. Roaring in the pouring rain, baring its sharp teeth, as if raging at the empty casket that it thought was full of food. It must have been that water dragon just then that was throwing the coffin boat about in its mouth, snapping here and twisting there. That coffin boat had gone to sea at first and drifted for a while, but it was dragged back by that water dragon. The two landed and returned to the Blackwater Island once more. Back at the beach, there were two more figures. It was the Watermaster, Wudu, and General Pei. Shawudu had his spiritual seal out, beckoning the rain and winds as if he was going to summon that water dragon. Pei Ming patted his shoulder. Watermaster Xiong, just take it easy, will you? This round is over, but who knows when the next round will come. So, just save your energy for now. It turned out that the sudden pouring rain just now was the accompaniment to Shawudu's heavenly calamity. The storm was calming down, and Shawudu threw his hands, turning to Hua Cheng and Shelian. He questioned, "What's with the two of you?" Fei Ming also piped up, "Yeah, Your Highness, why don't you two explain yourselves? What's going on? What were you two doing in there?" When that coffin boat exploded, their tight embrace was displayed for all to see. Shelian blinked and was about to speak when he suddenly realized that both he and Hua Cheng, after having tumbled around inside that narrow coffin boat, had their hair mussed and their clothes disheveled. They appeared as inappropriate as one could imagine. And after having wiped the rain off his face, his cheeks were still burning. Hua Cheng took a step forward, shielding him. A moment later, Shelian softly cleared his throat and said, "Nothing's going on, just the coffin is too small." Shawudu was puzzled. "I wasn't asking about that," he said. Pei Ming pointed at all the leftover wood pieces that they had left behind on the beach and asked, "The coffin was made on the spot, right? Why didn't you build a bigger one?" The design of the coffin boat was decided by both Hua Cheng and Shelian, and at the time, it seemed neither of them thought of building it bigger. So Shelian could only laugh awkwardly. "You're right," he said. "Did my lords only just drift to this island?" "That's right," Pei Ming replied. "Watermaster Xiong battled against the currents of this Blackwater demon lair, and we only just made it to this island. We didn't expect to see a coffin drift about on the surface of the Blackwater demon lair seas. What a curious sight." Shelian could feel his heart dropping, and he smiled. "Really curious, indeed," he said. "You," Shawudu said. He turned to Hua Cheng and squinted. "On the ship, didn't you say that only coffin wood that has carried the deceased won't sink in the Blackwater demon lair?" Pei Ming pulled out his sword and said leisurely, "Yeah, there's the coffin wood, but where's the deceased?" Hua Cheng smiled too and said, "If you're so concerned with who's dead, I suggest you go kill yourself." Pei Ming pointed the sword at him. "Such arrogance," he said, as expected of Crimson Rain Sword Flower. As suspected, he had already guessed. Hua Cheng burst out laughing, and sensing that a fight was about to start, Shelian stepped in front of Hua Cheng to block. "My lords, please calm yourselves," he said. "There's no need to worry. Sun Lang is on this journey out of generosity." "Sun Lang?" Pei Ming wondered. "I've never heard of how Crimson Rain sought flower ranked from whatever house. Generous, Your Highness. Are you sure that that's the word to describe him? Shawudu had to stand in the spotlight, so he pushed Pei Ming aside. He said sharply, "Are you the one messing things up on this trip? What's your intention in luring us here to the Blackwater Demon Lair? Where's Qingshuan?" "This is someone else's territory." "Do you think I want to be here?" Huacheng answered. Shilin was already used to these kinds of situations and changed the subject with practiced ease. "Has the Lord Windmaster not been found yet? Didn't General Pei go looking for them?" Pei Ming flipped open his arms and said, "They were fished up at first, but a giant wave from Watermaster Xiong came and swept them away." "Don't mislead, Pei Xiong," Shawudu said. "I can't raise waves. Those creatures in the sea kept coming one after the other. You couldn't find them in the first place." Shilin quickly said, Calm down. Lord Windmaster is together with Lord Earthmaster, so there shouldn't be any big trouble." Shawudu humphed. "Earthmaster," he said. "What good is the Earthmaster? Mediocre and average. He's not a martial god, and his spiritual powers aren't even as strong as Qingshuan's." Then he suddenly seemed to remember that Shi Qingshuan no longer possessed any trace of spiritual power. His face fell, and he fell silent. Shilin, however, thought that every spiritual stream had their own focus. Although Mingyi wasn't a martial god, and his spiritual powers weren't exactly strong, he still wasn't as horrible as the Watermaster described. Besides, the skills that the Earthmaster showed that time at the Banyue Pass weren't terrible. Even if he wasn't the best, he wasn't the worst. Pei Ming also said, "Don't be too worried just yet. As long as they don't run into the demon Xuan, Lord Earthmaster should be able to take care of things." Huacheng laughed. "The heavenly calamity is already pursuing you everywhere, fighting you. You made a huge mess of his lair, and you actually dare hope that the lair master hasn't noticed?" Suddenly, Shawudu's face twitched, and he took out a golden longevity locket out of the collar of his robes. Pei Ming asked, "Watermaster Xiong, did something happen?" That golden longevity locket seemed to be vibrating in his palm. Shawudu said, "Qingshuan is close by, and he's hurt." Shilin took a look at the golden locket. It looked exactly the same as the one Shi Qingshuan was wearing that day, the one he removed to build the protection array and left behind in the end. "Is Lord Windmaster still wearing that longevity locket?" he asked. "I recall he removed it before." "I picked it up and put it around him again," Shawudu said. It turned out that those two longevity lockets were forged by the golden cores of the two brothers. When they were near each other and one was hurt, the lockets would call out to each other. The closer they were to each other, the stronger the cry. This wasn't a spell, but rather a natural attribute, so it was unaffected by the power of the demon lair. Shawudu removed the longevity locket from his neck and dangled the chain from his hand. He held his arm out straight and slowly turned in a circle. When he was facing a certain direction, the vibration of that golden locket abruptly grew stronger. It was the direction of the forest, toward the unfathomably deep heart of this lonely island. Shawudu said grimly, "Looks like Qingshuan is on this island right now." Then he strode in large steps toward the forest. Naturally, Pei Ming followed along. Shilin contemplated. Since the Wind and Earth Masters were both on the island, and the Wind Master seemed to be injured and bleeding, they should be found first, and they could worry about the rest later. My lords, there are minions hidden inside the forest. Be careful of ambush, he warned. Ho Chang also came to follow. Xuelin was going to grab for his hand at first, but then he remembered his disgraceful state back inside the coffin boat, and the outstretched hand shrank back in spite of himself. In the end, he tugged until Ho Chang's sleeve, not daring to look at the face of the other. Fei Ming, however, looked back frequently and appeared to be very interested. Crimson Rain, Sword Flower, Your Highness, the two of you really are stuck together like glue, he said. A ghost king like yourself, following after us so openly, aren't you even going to try to avoid suspicion? Xuelin replied languidly. What is General Pei saying? Under these circumstances, it's less suspicious if he comes along. Otherwise, if my lords were to run into any dangers, how can he hope to clear his name if my lords were to suspect him? He's made it to the title of Supreme, so what's the difference if he's in front of our eyes or not? Fei Ming said. Would it not be easy for him to simply create a clone? Just as the words left his lips, a sharp sound ripped through the air. Fei Ming raised his hand and caught a stealth arrow. So there is something. That was close, he said. Watermaster Shang, be careful. Before he finished speaking, there were more swishing sounds, and several more stealth arrows came flying toward him. Cling, clang. Fei Ming swept his sword around and wondered woefully. What the hell? Shawudu laughed out loud. Pei Shang, I think you best watch yourself instead, he said. Then he quickened his pace. If it was only ambushing arrows, it wasn't anything to be afraid of. Just really annoying. Irritated, Fei Ming flattened a field of shrubbery and soon picked out a few little minions. You guys got guts, he shouted at them. Those little ghosts looked scrawny and sallow-skinned, only the lowest of minions. Hanging from his hand, they were terrified by the general into little balls, begging for mercy. They were only guarding the door, after all, so fighting intruders couldn't be helped. After scaring them with some words, Fei Ming let them go. However, when they ran into more cunning and vicious ones later, Fei Ming squashed them into a ball and dribbled them as they made their way. The four of them brushed away branches and pushed their way through bushes through the thick forest, walking for who knows how long. But the golden locket in Shawudu's hand was crying louder and louder. Finally, they reached an empty area within the middle of the forest. The heart of the forest was a lake, and the four walked toward it. Suddenly, Fei Ming spoke up. Crimson Rain, Sword Flower, if you keep this prank up, I won't be able to tolerate you any longer. Both Ho Chang and Xuelin looked at him, then looked at each other. Fei Ming frowned and continued. If you want to fight, then challenge me like a man. Pei isn't like those 33 heavenly officials. I'm not afraid of you. Shoving me every now and then is meaningless. Ho Chang raised his brows and said, Gogo, you have to believe me. That's got nothing to do with me. Xuelin intervened. General Pei, he doesn't play those meaningless pranks. Fei Ming was doubtful. Really? He asked. Xuelin became alarmed. Be careful, he said. It might be something else on this island, stirring up trouble. Fei Ming stopped talking. Just then, Shawudu slowed his pace. It's here, he said. That golden longevity locket seemed to be crying its hardest at this place, meaning that Shiching Shuan was somewhere close. Yet everything here could be seen clearly. Other than a lake, there was nothing else. Could there be an underground palace? Fei Ming wondered. Shahudu stared at the surface of the water, and Shilian said, "It's also possible that it's at the bottom of the water." However, this lake on Blackwater Island shouldn't be entered so randomly, lest one be unable to resurface. The surface of that lake was calm without ripples, appearing like a giant mirror, reflecting the blanched moon hung high in the night sky without stars or clouds. The four walked along the edge of the lake. Shilian was still thinking of how to investigate the bottom of the lake when, without warning, a terrified scream ripped through the night air. The one leading the group was Shahudu. The one bringing up the rear was Pei Ming. The three in front all looked back. The one who screamed was a little ghost that Pei Ming had captured on the road. The skull was gone, and black blood was spurting meters high from its neck. The head that was flung into the air was screaming piercingly. "General Pei, what are you doing, killing it so suddenly?" Shilian asked. Pei Ming, however, exclaimed, "No!" But before he could explain, his body sank, one knee hitting the ground. Ho Chang laughed. "There's no need for such formalities," he said. Yet Pei Ming's expression was starkly shocked. He shouted, "Watermaster Xiang, watch out!" However, what was there to watch out for? Other than the four of them by the lake, there was nothing else. It was as if Pei Ming was bound by something invisible. Shahudu was rushing over to help him, when suddenly a flash of chilling light from the air greeted him instead. He dodged just in time, yet a trail of blood was still sliced across one of his cheeks. He wiped it with his hand, and his face dropped. Shilian placed himself in front of Ho Chang to shield him, and said, "The invisibility spell?" Pei Ming finally broke free of the thing that was formlessly constraining him, and he shouted, "Gather around, don't break up." Shahudu didn't care. The moment he felt that longevity locket start crying again, he started charging around the lake, frantically calling out, "Qing Xuan! Qing Xuan!" It was a chaotic situation. However, it was precisely amidst this ruckus that Shilian suddenly noticed something exceedingly unnerving. Along the edge of the lake shore, the area was flat and empty, nothing to be seen. However, the lake shore reflected on the lake's surface was different. In the reflection, upon the other shore of the lake, stood a charcoal black building. That building was chillingly gloomy, looking nothing like a residence, but more so a prison. There was no door, only a set of windows high above, unforgivingly sealed by rows of iron bars. From between those iron bars peeked a pale white hand, waving desperately as if begging for help. Shilian whipped his head up and looked to the shore before him. There was veritably nothing besides Shahudu holding out the longevity locket. When he looked down again, the reflection in the lake also veritably showed that chilling iron prison. Shahudu was searching around right before that iron prison, but he couldn't see it. Shilian blurted out, "My lords, I found it. Look." Just then, his pupils suddenly shrank. Something new was reflected within the Blackwater lake. A shadowy figure had appeared soundlessly behind both him and Hua Chang.